less than 20 minutes, I'm going to show you how to do Angular 7 validation and authorization using JWT token that looks something like this one right here. I'm going to show you how to build Angular material design form, a sign-in form that looks like this, that has labels. It's got regular text fields like this username field here, and also password fields that have masked characters like this one right here. I'm going to show you how to build Angular material design button like this, which is currently enabled and which is now disabled. I'm also going to show you how to do validation on a form, whereby if you don't enter anything inside the password field, you'll get a message that says password is required. If I enter less than 5 characters, it'll tell you password must be at least 5 characters long. But if I enter the correct username and password, then the entire form is validated and the login button is now enabled. I'm going to show you how to prevent unauthorized users from accessing your system. Like for instance, if I enter the wrong username password combination, it will tell me that username and or password do not match just because I don't have an M right here. But of course, if I enter the correct username and password and I'm an authorized user, and click the login button, it'll get me to this secured web page. This page cannot be accessed unless you have a good username password combination. So this is what we're going to be doing today. Welcome, and let's get started. First thing we're going to do, I'm going to go to my Visual Studio Code and I'm going to close this, and I'm just going to say File, Open Folder. And what this is going to do is going to open a complete Angular 7 project by opening a folder. You want to do select folder, user. We used this folder for our last tutorial, volume 1. And you click on that, select that, and it opens up the project, and now it'll look like this. We're going to have this project structure so that as the project grows larger, you'll see that it's harder to find files in there. We have the source app page, we have the login pages over here, and the registration pages are going to be here eventually. So we have the sign in, we have the list user. These are the 2 pages we're going to be working on using the auth guard, which we put into our utility folder. To generate these pages, in order to keep the tutorial under 30 minutes, I'm just going to copy and paste, and then I'll explain to you. In the tutorial comments section below, you'll see our blog where you can learn more about how we did this. You can also get the complete source code for this tutorial for free from our GitHub webpage that you can find a link for below in the YouTube comments section. Let's generate the components that we need and the util guard. First, I'm going to open in Visual Studio Code. If you do new terminal, I'm going to do CLS here because I'm in Windows. It means clear the screen. And I'm just going to paste the command. So this command just basically says ng, which is a call to Angular, means generate a component, put it into a folder called page and a subfolder called login, like we showed you up here. And the component itself is called sign in. We'll say spec false, meaning we're going to be using only one CSS for the entire tutorial. This styles.css. I'm just saying don't give me any more files than just the HTML and the TypeScript file for the sign in component. Module app is equals to app means that, you know, in Angular 7 you can have several modules. We're only using one module for our tutorials, which is the app module, the main default module. So that's all that's doing. I'm going to enter there. That will generate me the sign-in component. I'm going to generate the other components just the same way. It's done. Now I'm going to generate the list user component. And last but not least, we're going to generate a guard. This time around, you notice that now we're saying ng generate guard instead of component because we want a guard. We put it in a different folder called util right here. And we're going to call it auth. And this is going to generate the auth guard. Again, spec is false. We just want the TypeScript file. And we're going to attach it to the module app. And that is done. If you look in here, you can see util, we have our guard, we have our page. The application looks kind of like the way we described up here. We're going to do now Angular application routing. This right here is the app routing. And right now, I'm going to start the application. If we go to our application now, we're going to get the first page, which is just basically going to be this thing right here. It's just going to show us this. But you notice down here is our routing, and on top here is a Angular material toolbar that we set up in the first tutorial. The routes are not configured yet. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste. And those are the routes that we're going to have. The application is now running, as you can see down here. Let's go to the application and take a look. We're going to start off by commenting out this welcome to user and leave just the material toolbar and the router. To do that, we go to Visual Studio Code. And this is the page that is displaying, and I'm just going to comment out everything over here and leave that part. We go back now to our application. So I'm going to do now F12 just to show the Chrome developer tools. If there's any errors, you'll see them in red here. If there's any warnings, you'll see them in yellow. You need to fix those. It's a good habit to start with that. So now that we have this, let's do that routing. So we go back to our Visual Studio Code and we go to the routing file. First of all, if you see a squiggly underline like this, that means that Angular doesn't know this component. So in order to import the component itself, you place your cursor on the word and you do control period and you get suggestions. You enter the correct suggestion, which is the first one. That sign-in component has been imported. So you got to do that for all the imports. That's a little trick with a Visual Studio Code IDE. I'm going to place the cursor there, do control period, do enter. It's going to import AuthGuard. And then last but not least, place the cursor there, control period, enter. We have configured 3 paths, if you notice. But first, I'm going to inactivate these for now. Like that. Now I'm going to save this, and I want you to watch what happens. We go to the Chrome browser. Currently, we don't have paths configured. It was going to the first page. Now it comes to the list user. The reason why it's saying list user now, our paths are configured, and that's how easy it is to configure paths. If the user doesn't supply any path, go to list user. List user is this component here that we built, and it says list user works. We have finished 2 things, generating components and guards, configuring the Angular routing. What we're going to do now is do the pages. This page right here, sign in user, we're going to put code in here. So I'm going to just copy and paste the code and explain to you what I did. This is an Angular material component called mat card. And every time you do a component, remember to come back to the material module that we created in tutorial 1 and import it. This is mat card module. We import the module this way into this module, and then we export it into the application so that other pages like list user can use it. Now, mat card has sub components, mat card title and mat card footer. We're using those 2. The title is going to be aligned to the center, and it's going to show a div. When you see a class like that in a div, that is just your regular CSS div. You have to go to your CSS and you have to add that class. Yeah. And then in the mat card footer, we're aligning it to the right, and it's a button, mat raised button, color accent. This is Angular material design component, and so we have to add it. We come back in here and we add a button. And on this button, we have an icon. And this again is an Angular material. I'm going to come back here and we're going to say mat icon module. Again, export it into the application. Last but not least, we have this, and this is a JavaScript method. So I'm going to come over here. I don't need on init, so I'm going to remove that implementation. And instead of ng on init, I'm going to replace that with our logout method. Just do a save here and go back to our application and see how it's going so far. Now you can see that our page is going to refresh. It's got this, it's got our logout button. So let's go ahead and implement the logout button functionality. Component in the logout, we're going to do that. First, let's create something called error message of type any. I like to handle my errors. And then as for the router, we're just going to come to the constructor and do the private router. So what we're doing here is that when somebody clicks on the logout button, we're just going to remove the access token, and then we use the Angular navigation to navigate now to the sign-in page. That's all we're doing over here. So I'm going to save this. We're going to go back to the browser. Now, if I click on logout, now it takes us to the sign-in page. Let's go ahead and build this page so it looks nice instead of just saying sign in. First, I'm going to start by building the sign-in component. I'm just going to copy again the code and paste it and then explain to you what I did. And again, you can always go to our blog or just get the code, and it's very self-explanatory. I don't need the on init. This import that was done during scaffolding, I don't need that. Again, error message. And then I'm going to introduce something called a form group. This is basically our form. We're going to have a form from Angular Forms. As you can see, form group comes from there. And in our constructor, I like to do that. Form builder again, control period, enter. And then router again, control period, enter. We're going to have a method here that I'm going to call build form. Right here inside the construct, what I'm going to say, this dot build form. Before you forget, if you start using these form groups, you have to go to your application module over here, and in the imports you have to import something called reactive forms module. That's the Angular module that you need for reactive forms. Inside here, what I'm going to do is now to create this form. And to create a form, all you do is to say this dot login form is equals to this dot form builder group. And inside here, you need to have an array. And inside here, we have two fields. The first one is called username, and then we're going to have another array here. Like that. So I'm gonna click on this and say control period import Angular. Username is required, has to have a minimum length of 5, and it has to be an email. We have another field here called password. It's required, minimum length is 5, and maximum length is 20. So it's a little bit different from the other one. We're gonna have a method here called onLogin. So all we're doing is get the username from the form, and this is how you get something from a form. You do the form name controls and the form control and value, and that will give you the username, and this will give you the password. And we're doing something very simple now. In the future, we're going to call this from the database, log into the database, see if your username and password are in the database and if they match, and if you have the permissions to go to the page. And then we're going to, once that happens, we're going to generate a JSON Web Token or JWT token. At the moment, all we did is in the local storage, which is your browser storage, browser memory, we set an item called access token, and we pass in this long string. So this I actually got from a real JWT token, so they'll look like that. It's very long to make it harder for hackers to hack. And we're saying just the error message is null, because if you have this username and this password, then you successfully logged in, and direct the user out of the list user, which is the page that is restricted now that the user has successfully logged in. If something happens in the back end and the user is not able to be authenticated properly, put this message, username and password do not match, and routers instead of the list user to the sign-in page again, so you can return the user there so they enter the correct information. That's all we're doing right there. And that's all for this class. Let's go now to the sign-in component HTML. We have a mat card again, which we already have. We have a title, we have a content, and we have a footer in this case. And we have something else also called a mat divider. What this div does is that if there's an error, then it calls a CSS class called error. So let's go to our styles and add that class there. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so there it is. So that's what the error is there. This error message right here that we defined, if you look in here, we have error message. And we said that if somebody logs in successfully, it'll be null. If they don't log in successfully, it's going to have a message. If there's a message, display that message using this class. So basically, if you come to the class, you see that it will just display it in crimson or red, for that matter. A little color that I like. So, and now we have a mat divider. This again is an Angular material design module. So we're going to come in and add it again. Mat divider. Bring them in here. We're doing that. We are doing a title header for login. And I think we already have this title header because we used it before. So we already have title header right there. It's a CSS class. And we have a hint to say that username is there. Don't do this in production, but I'm doing it here just for demo purposes for our tutorial. And we have a CSS class here called hint message. So let's go ahead and do it. And all I'm doing here is just using a color called Bollywood that I like. Now we come to the form. The form now we call a form group. So, and in here we're going to call login form. As you can see, this is our form. Our form is called login form that we define over here, that we initialize once we get into the application. So we're just saying login form. Again, a math card inside there to make it look beautiful, and that has only content. And then we have something called a mat grid list, which again is a component. So we need to go here back and say import that mat grid list module. And then we have a div called login fields container. So I'm just going to come over here to the CSS and define that class. Again, let's look in here. We can see we have a mat form field. When you have this, you need to come, this is again mat component, mat input field. That's it, and that's just for these inputs here. So, and as you can see, we have the icons, mat prefix, account circle. You'll see how that looks. We have a username that has all these validations. So this is how, now once you define this over here, kind of like this, then you come over here and say mat error, and then you would say username if it's required, minimum length, and email. And again, here we have a button. It's disabled if the login form is invalid. That means that if any of these conditions are not met, just show it as a disabled. Once they're met, enable it. And once somebody clicks on there, go to the login method. That's it for now. So we save this, and let's go see what happens. So I'm going to come to the browser and see if there's any errors. So we should see a form in here. And as you can see, there's a form there. And now that we have everything, we're going to go implement the guard. We just need a constructor here, and then we're going to say private router, and then over here, instead of return true, this is what we're going to do. All we're saying is that if in the local storage there's an item called access token, then log in the user, otherwise redirect to the sign-in page. Now we enable our up routing. So now I'm going to delete this, and it should all work. Can activate, we're calling our guard. We're saying once we call the guard, if somebody comes over here and if they have the access token, log them in, otherwise send it to the sign-in component, and let's see how it looks. So everything is working now. Let's test it. Now to test it, I'll do a little trick. I just made the screen show a default username and password. And the way you do that is I went in there and I said, I hard coded it basically. You're not supposed to do that in production, but I did that for our tutorial. To test the application, first look at this login button. It's now enabled because the form contains the correct information. Go in here and you'll see it says username is required. It says username must be at least 5 characters long. It says username must be a valid email address. If I enter the correct information, you notice now the login button is enabled. The login button is disabled because one of the validations, password, is required. If I enter 4 characters, it tells me password must be at least 5 characters long. And if I enter the correct information, the login button is enabled again. If I try to log in with the wrong username and password, it'll tell me username and or password do not match. If I know the page that I need to go to and I'm not validated, and I try to go to list user, it'll tell me that return the URL is list user, and it takes me back to the sign-in page and asks me to log in first. Why won't it let me go there? Because local storage access token is undefined. If I log in with the correct information now, it takes me to the protected page, and now if I go in here, I have the industry standard JWT token. And now that I have that JWT token, I can go to any page I want, go to the sign-in page. It allows me to go there. I can go back to the list user, the protected page, and it still lets me come in here. And why is that? Because again, I have the JWT token, and so I'm a validated user. Logging out brings you back in here, and that's it for our tutorial today. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please post them in our comment section, and I'd like to ask you a question. Is there any topics you want me to prepare a tutorial for? I have a list of tutorials upcoming, but I'd like to know what your opinion is on what's more important, what you'd like to see in our tutorial, so I can do that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and goodbye.